When a narcissist was so absorbed by their own sense of invincibility that they walked right into the hands of a federal agent, they were caught in the act. Unbeknownst to them, the shadowy individual that they thought was an ally, a hacker for hire, was actually an undercover agent who was ready to strike. Notwithstanding the fact that money was traded, secrets were divulged, and the narcissist's attitude ultimately led to their demise. In a moment of reckoning, the true burst, they were caught red-handed, their empire of manipulation toppling under the weight of their own obsession. They were caught red-handed. The federal government had engaged in the most difficult game possible. The narcissists, on the other hand, were completely unprepared for it. They were unable to bear the thought of your glow-up, your peace, and your ability to move forward without them. It haunted them like a puzzle that had not been solved, and it also tortured their ego like a wound that insisted on not healing. Because of the fact that you had become the one thing that they were unable to control, they were driven into a desperate and escalating infatuation by this reality. It felt as though every action you took, every stride you took that was beyond their reach, was an insult to their delicate feeling of authority. It was necessary for them to be aware of what you were doing, who you were with, and most importantly, whether or not you were growing successfully without them. It was as if a slow poison had taken root in their psyche, like paranoia. At first, they were able to persuade themselves that it was simply curiosity, a harmless need to be informed. Nevertheless, the reality was much more sinister. They were falling apart. The concern that they were most concerned about was not losing you, but rather losing control over how others viewed you. The moment you broke free, the moment they saw you rising without their meddling, their world began to collapse. They had constructed an illusion of power, a narrative in which they were always ahead and always invincible. However, the moment you broke free, their world began to collapse. There was no longer any success with the conventional means, such as the false accounts, the flying monkeys, or the mutual ties that they had previously utilized as informants. You had closed every door and locked every window. In spite of the fact that their access had been revoked, they disregarded the decision. At that point, they went beyond the bounds of acceptable behavior. They resorted to the use of technology, employing malware, social engineering, and hackers from the black market in order to invade your privacy. If they were unable to keep an eye on you from the outside, they would figure out a means to enter the building. Through the use of disposable gadgets, encrypted messaging, and backdoor spying technologies, they believed that they were intelligent and that their methods were too complex to be discovered. Their desperation caused them to act recklessly, despite the fact that they attempted to regain the control that they had lost. The hubris of these individuals led them to believe that they were untouchable and that they could buy their way into your society without facing any consequences. The fact that the walls were closing in on them, that every digital footprint they left behind, every unlawful transaction they conducted, and every step they took was driving them straight into a trap, was something they failed to realize. In truth, what they thought was their master plan turned out to be them making the most significant error. They had their sights set on exerting control over you, but instead, they succeeded in bringing about their own demise without even realizing it. The worst aspect was that the federal government was already keeping an eye on it. It was their hubris that prevented them from seeing the fact that they were not the predators in this game. Rather, they were the prey. This was something that they were clueless about. For a considerable amount of time, prior to even making contact with their so-called hacker for hire, law enforcement had already been monitoring the situation. There was nothing more than a breadcrumb going directly to their own demise, and every desperate step they made, every unsuccessful attempt to slide back into your world, was nothing more than that. In the course of the hacking attempts, fraudulent transactions were tracked down, cyber stalking was recorded, and the information was meticulously documented. They were under the impression that they were conducting their business in the shadows, but in reality, they had been following the spotlight the entire time. Each strategy that they conceived of and every unlawful tool that they used had left a trace, a digital fingerprint that connected them directly to the crimes that they believed they could conceal. They had been reckless as a result of their paranoia, and their recklessness had caused them to be sloppy. When they believed that they had discovered a means to go back in, however, they made their most significant error, which was the fateful miscalculation that would determine their fate. They reached out to a hacker, a nameless individual in the shadowy realm of cybercrime, because they were so desperate that they were blinded by their anxiety. They were under the impression that they were establishing a direct connection into your privacy, which would allow them to reclaim control. However, what they failed to recognize was that this hacker was not just any dark operator. Rather, this hacker was an undercover agent who had been waiting for them to accept the bait. It was too simple. They were so eager, so confident in their own brilliance, that they never questioned who they were actually working with. It was too easy. They handed over the money, sent clear instructions, and specified exactly what it was that they wanted: access to your life, your chats, and your digital environment. There was no hesitancy on their part. Every single word that they uttered, every single demand that they made, and every single transaction that they took part in was being tracked. At that same instant, they were already in the losing position. They were just unaware of it. Despite the fact that they had just signed their own arrest warrant, they had assumed that they were the brains behind the scheme and the one who was pulling the strings. The bet had been placed, and the countdown had already started. Soon, the walls would close in. Soon, they would know that they were not the ones in power. They had been played, and the worst thing is that they had played themselves. Soon thereafter, the walls would shut in. After they had transferred the money, the case against them was considered to have been closed. Now, every single keystroke, every single whispered order, and every single haughty demand constituted evidence. It was indisputable and impossible to avoid. The federal government, however, was not going to move in just yet. It was not enough to just make an arrest. Rather, it was necessary to construct a case that was impenetrable, a case that was so precisely built that there would be no room for excuses and no possibilities for exploiting loopholes. It wasn't just that the trap had been laid, it was getting closer and closer, one strategic move at a time. In order to foster the narcissist's delusions of control, the agents participated in a long-term strategy. They reacted slightly more than was necessary to maintain their interest, thereby dangling the possibility of achievement in front of their very eyes. Because they were so preoccupied with their own dominance fantasies, the narcissist never had any suspicions. They believed that they were conducting their business in private and moving in silence. What they failed to recognize was that the quiet was a direct result of them stepping straight into a cage, one that had been constructed particularly for them. The evidence was accumulating behind the scenes. Every digital footprint was being followed, every transaction was being analyzed, and every interaction was being catalogued. Phone calls were being recorded, emails were being intercepted, and money transactions were being detected and tracked. There was no chance of escape. Despite this, they continued on with their hubris, confident that they were in charge of the situation. They didn't question how effortlessly they had acquired what they thought was a direct route into your inner life, nor did they question how neatly everything was moving. They were too preoccupied with their obsession to notice the minute subtleties, such as the delays, the carefully worded comments, and the little hesitations, which were designed to keep them chatting for a little bit longer. They were too blinded by their urge to spy. And so they continued on, digging their own grave, one frantic plea at a time. And they continued to move forward. Every time they demanded additional access or made another payment, they were unintentionally drafting their own confession. This was happening every time they did one of those things. It was unnecessary for the federal government to pursue them because they were willfully putting themselves in harm's way by passing over every piece of evidence that was required to eliminate them. They believed that they were conducting their business in secret. They believed that they were still the ones pulling the strings, but in truth, they were nothing more than a puppet in a show that they were not even aware was taking place. When the final minute arrived, there would be no way for them to flee the situation because their time was running out. Leave a comment. They were the ones that laid the trap for me, yet they ended up bringing about their own demise. Karma is a law that never fails to strike. They were not suddenly confronted with the truth. Rather, it came upon them gradually and suffocatingly, as if a noose were being tightened around their throat. At first, it was only a feeling, a glimmer of worry, a moment of pause as they checked their messages and found that the hacker they believed they had hired had not responded to any of their messages. On the other hand, that sensation intensified. It raged at them, and then, as if a freight train had slammed into their chest, the reality of the situation smashed down on them. They are no longer able to hide behind phony accounts and engage in illicit business operations since they have been caught. No more manipulations, no more illusions of control. The power that they had previously possessed had been taken away from them in an instant, leaving them exposed, vulnerable, and completely helpless on the outside. The proof was indisputable. It included money transfers, discussions that were recorded, and digital footprints that immediately tied them to the crimes that they committed. After playing perfectly into the hands of the feds, there was no way out of the situation at this point. There were a few of them who attempted to refute it. They stutteringly said, "This is a mistake," with their voices shaking with fear. Although they maintained that they had nothing to do with it and that it was a setup, the agents continued to act as if nothing had happened. There was no opportunity for bargaining, and there was no path to take in order to change the story. It was already too late to escape the fortifications. There were others who attempted to flee, frantically trying to delete their files, delete their tracks, and wipe their gadgets clean. But it was already too late. Hard drives had been cloned. Transactions could be traced back to their accounts, and every desperate click and type was captured. The federal government had everything you could possibly need. It was the instant that they believed they could outsmart the system that they realized they had already lost. Those who should have known better, those who had seen there was no way out, remained mute. As the world around them came crashing down around them, they sat there in horrified disbelief. Their empire of deception had shattered, and it was reduced to nothing more than a cautionary tale of arrogance and self-destruction. There was no longer any control, and there were no more confidential information. Those individuals who had before scoffed at the consequences of their actions and who had believed that they were untouchable were now the ones who were being brought into the harsh light of truth. What they had done in the shadows was now on full display for the entire world to see, and the worst part was that there was no one left to save them. They were under the impression that they were playing a game of control that they were the ones who were moving the pieces on the board. However, what they failed to comprehend was that the game was never controlled by them. Rather, it was controlled by you. Starting from the minute they made the decision to spy, hack, and manipulate, they were putting themselves in a position to be destroyed. The very energy that they put into trying to break you just served to break them instead, which is a testament to the fact that the universe does not tolerate injustice for very long. They had spent years evading accountability and weaving lies so meticulously that even they began to believe them. They believed that they were invincible, untouchable, and immune to the consequences of their actions. On the other hand, there was one thing that they failed to take into account. You, your presence, your robustness, and your refusal to submit to their games. You were never only a target, rather, you were the key to their exposure, the final domino that brought their entire strategy to a crashing halt. Each and every step that they took to penetrate your life was a step closer to their own demise. Each and every desperate attempt that they made to reclaim control led them deeper into the trap that they had inadvertently constructed for themselves. Their desire to ruin you turned out to be the precise thing that brought about their own demise. There was something more than just the federal government keeping an eye on things. It was something that was beyond their grasp. Despite the fact that humans play dirty, the universe plays fairly. All of the things that they conspired against you, what they murmured in private, and what they did behind closed doors came back to them, magnified. The same falsehoods that they told, the traps that they lay, and the destruction that they attempted to orchestrate became the very things that sealed their doom. The fact that they had been able to get away with everything for such a long time led them to believe that they were untouchable. They went through life like ghosts, wreaking havoc and disappearing without drawing attention to themselves, but this time they chose the wrong person to target. Because they were unable to take your light, they ended up destroying themselves in the process of attempting to do so. They believed that they could alter the truth and change the story so that it would fit their agenda, but the reality was that there was no way to get away from it. The moment the scales of divine justice began to tip, no amount of lies, manipulation, or power plays could spare them from the consequences. In the end, they were nothing more than pawns in their own demise, despite the fact that they had spent their entire lives preying on other people and feeling that they were beyond the rules of the world. And now, well, now they are the ones who are being watched. They are the ones who are living in fear, constantly looking over their shoulders, wondering when the next wave of consequences will hit. As they become enamored with you, the paranoia that previously engulfed them has now turned inward. Whenever they get a phone call, a knock at the door, or an unexpected email, they flinch because they are aware that karma is still working to collect the consequences of their actions. Those who were chosen were spared the need to engage in this conflict since it had already been won. As of right now, there is no way to undo or erase what has been done. When it comes to narcissists, power is not simply about control. Rather, it is focused on perception. They methodically build their image, weaving a web of illusions that are designed to make the world perceive them as unbeatable, impenetrable, and always one step ahead of the competition. Nevertheless, that image is now irreparably damaged beyond repair. In the beginning, there were only a few people who raised their eyebrows and had quiet conversations behind closed doors. However, as time went on, the truth spread like wildfire. It used to be that their name was mentioned with admiration or terror, but now it is simply synonymous with shame. Those individuals who had previously showered them with accolades, those who enabled them, Those who sycophants and those who hung on to their every word have all of a sudden become silent. A sinking ship is something that no one wants to be connected with. Former associates of theirs are distancing themselves from one another by erasing old photographs and removing any reference to their shared history. They say, "I had no idea," and they are right. I was never really close to them. The same individuals who were formerly at their side are now acting as if they never existed for the first time. Not only is the fall from grace a legal consequence, but it is also a social consequence. And for a narcissist, this is the best possible punishment. The news is quickly disseminated, and social media platforms are flooded with rumors, receipts, and evidence that cannot be refuted. The internet, which they had previously utilized to shape and control the narrative, is now the very thing that is exposing them in real time. Screenshots are being posted online, and audio recordings are being obtained. Moreover, the most unfortunate aspect is that they are unable to stop it. Every attempt to deny, to pervert the narrative, or to play the victim just serves to add fuel to the flames. Their lies are no longer being believed by anyone. The people in the community who were formerly afraid of them are now laughing at them. These are the people who they humiliated, who they tormented, and who they attempted to exert control over. As they watch the spectacle unfold, they are observing it with a sense of contentment. It's not only about being locked up. Sometimes, justice is about coming to the slow and terrible awareness that the world sees you for exactly what you are, and the humiliation doesn't end there. They are embarrassed by their family, their inner circle has disappeared, invitations are drying up, doors are closing, opportunities are disappearing, job offers are being revoked, and business transactions are being cancelled. Before it was used as a tool to open doors, their name is now used as a warning sign. The way that people perceived them was something that they spent years attempting to manage, but now they have absolutely no control over it. Not only has their reputation been harmed, but it has been completely destroyed, and they are unable to restore it. They are unable to rewrite history. They are unable to quiet the internet, and they are unable to make people forget to forget. They used to thrive on attention, adulation, and the appearance of power, but now, whenever someone looks at them, all they see is disgrace. They used to thrive on these things. In addition, that stain will accompany them for the rest of their lives, regardless of where they go or how hard they attempt to escape it. They are no longer relevant. They have been exposed, and they will never recover from this situation. This is their worst nightmare come true. Even if their empire is falling apart, their paranoia is not going away. They continue to be obsessed, they continue to be desperate, and they continue to look for a way to regain control. They are scrambling, attempting to cling to whatever shards of power they believe they can maintain by any means necessary. Nevertheless, here is the reality. They are not willing to embrace you. You are now untouchable. They have attempted to infiltrate your digital world by using phony accounts, hidden spyware, and other methods. They have tried everything at their disposal. They are faced with nothing but dead ends each time they believe they have discovered a way in, a break in the wall, but they remain unsuccessful. The very same strategies that were once so successful now fail to operate in a stunning manner. Because this is not only about technology. Rather, it is about something more significant. They do not comprehend the reason for it, nor do they comprehend the explanation for it. They are unable to accomplish anything they set out to achieve. Every attempt to spy, track, or manipulate them is greeted with an invisible force that prevents them from doing so. They believed that they could play the role of the puppet master, but now they are the ones who are going to be performed. Their own paranoia has turned against them in a negative way. They are chasing ghosts of a power that they no longer possess, and they are seeing shadows where there are none whatsoever. They are now the ones looking for prey. They were so anxious to utilize the hacker, but now they are unable to locate them. The alleged ally, who they believed would break down the walls for them, has vanished like a ghost, leaving no trace behind. Every single lead is lost, every single connection is broken, and the further they delve, the more difficult it becomes. It's almost as if the universe itself has stepped in and blocked every possible route that might lead back to you. They do not comprehend the reason why they are unable to communicate with you, nor do they comprehend the reason why their access has been permanently removed. However, you are no longer a part of their world. You are no longer dependent on their games, their manipulation, or their fixation. None of this is relevant anymore. Beyond their grasp, beyond their tricks, and beyond the chaos in which they flourish, you have raised yourself significantly. While you are safe, sheltered, and untouchable, they are the ones who are being observed at this moment. Their devices are being monitored, their accounts are being traced, and their every move is being scrutinized. The federal government has taken the initiative to put them under surveillance. Whereas in the past, they were the ones hiding in the shadows. They are now the ones who are being exposed to the light. They are stuck in a game that they will never be able to win. The further they delve into it, the more they are destroying themselves. And you don't even need to make an effort to accomplish anything. It was never just about hacking. It was never just about surveillance, manipulation, or control. This was never just about what happened. The conflict was a battle of energy, of karma, and of divine justice that was taking place in real time. This was spiritual warfare. They were under the impression that they were conducting their business in complete secrecy and that their acts would never come back to harm them. However, the cosmos never forgets. The balances must always be in equilibrium. And when you move with good intentions, with divine protection surrounding you, no adversary, regardless of how dishonest or persistent they may be, will be able to achieve any kind of success against you. It was their belief that they could take what was not theirs, which included your authority, your privacy, and your tranquility. Despite the fact that they were sure they were above the consequences of their actions, they schemed, plotted, and maneuvered. But the laws of the universe do not bend for narcissists. Each and every one of the actions that they performed against you was a thread in the web that ultimately led to their own demise. However, they were not fighting you. Rather, they were fighting something much more powerful, something that they had no hope of winning against. Karma has finally arrived, and it is wearing the visage of justice before it. They attempted to play God, to rewrite reality in their favor, and to twist fate to match their goals. But now, they are the ones who are being tried in the court of divine order with the hope of being found guilty.